What happens when humanity becomes so obsessed with creating artificial intelligence that it starts losing touch with what it means to be human? Not smarter, human. Because after reading chapter 3 of Pope Leo XIV's encyclical Magnifica Humanitas, I genuinely don't think this is fundamentally a conversation about technology anymore. I think that this is a conversation about the human soul. And I know that sounds dramatic, but listen to what Pope Leo writes. We are called to reflect on the great construction sites of our era and ask, what are we building? Chapter 3, paragraph 35. That question hit me like a truck. Because look around for 5 seconds. We are building systems now that can imitate human conversation, empathy, friendship, intimacy, creativity, and intelligence. And yet, at this same exact time, modern society is becoming more isolated, anxious, distracted, addicted, emotionally detached, and spiritually disoriented than ever. That should disturb us. And what makes this chapter so powerful is that Pope Leo refuses to reduce this conversation to AI good or AI bad. Instead, he goes much deeper. He starts asking questions almost nobody else is asking. What happens when technological power develops faster than moral formation? What happens when society becomes obsessed with efficiency but loses wisdom? What happens when convenience replaces contemplation? What happens when people solely stop seeking real relationships because artificial simulations feel easier? And maybe the most chilling line in this entire chapter is when Pope Leo says that artificial intelligences do not know from within what love, work, friendship, or responsibility mean. Chapter 3, paragraph 48. That line cuts right to the center of everything. Because machines may be able to imitate human behavior, but they cannot become human persons. They can't suffer, sacrifice, love, enter communion, know God, or become holy. And the deeper I got into this chapter, the more I realized Pope Leo is not warning us that machines are becoming human. He is warning us that humans may slowly become machine-like, optimized, efficient, productive, stimulated, and connected to everything, yet deeply disconnected from God, from others, and even from themselves. And that's why this chapter feels less like a technology discussion and more like a spiritual diagnosis of modern civilization itself. So let's get into this, because chapter 3 of Magnifica Humanitas may honestly be one of the most profound things that the church has said about artificial intelligence, power, and the future of humanity in the digital age, the construction sites of the modern world. One of the most powerful images Pope Leo uses in this chapter is the idea of construction sites. And I love that imagery because it immediately forces us to realize something. Civilization is not static. It's being built right now in real time by us. It's shaped through our choices, values, systems, the technologies we normalize, and what we tolerate or reward. And Pope Leo writes, we are called to reflect on the great construction sites of our era and ask, what are we building? Chapter 3, paragraph 35. That question is so much bigger than artificial intelligence itself, because he's really asking, what kind of world are we constructing? What kind of culture are we creating? And what kind of human beings are we forming inside this environment? Artificial intelligence is not just changing one sector of society. It's reshaping language, relationships, education, economics, government, art, communication, labor, attention, and even how human beings perceive reality itself. And Pope Leo makes it very clear that this is not some future issue we can casually postpone thinking about. He says directly, this is a choice not only for our future, but also for our present. Since artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies are already part of our daily lives. Chapter 3, paragraph 36. A lot of people still talk about AI as though it's some distant sci-fi scenario. Meanwhile, people are already using these systems to communicate, to learn, to write, to work, form opinions, filter information, build or replace relationships, and shape public thought and identity itself. The transformation is already happening. And Pope Leo is calling Catholics, and really all people of goodwill, to stop being passive consumers inside this moment. He writes, we believers must and can choose which projects to work on and in what manner, so as to safeguard and value the grandeur of humanity that has been given to us as a gift. Chapter 3, paragraph 39. That phrase, the grandeur of humanity, I absolutely love it. Because notice the language he uses throughout this encyclical. He doesn't view humanity as a problem to solve, as obsolete or inefficient, or as something to even transcend. He views humanity as something grand, something sacred, and given by God. And this is where the conversation becomes deeply spiritual very quickly, because every civilization is ultimately built on an underlying vision of the human person. Every system, economy, culture, and technological framework has something being worshipped underneath it. It highlights a specific vision of the good life, success, power, and the human being. And what Pope Leo is warning is that if we build technologies detached from truth, morality, relationship, and God, we eventually begin constructing systems that deform the human person rather than serve him. Which is why he keeps bringing us back to discernment, not fear, not hysteria, but discernment. Because the question is not merely what can we build? The question is what should we build? And who are we becoming while we build it? Power without moral formation. One of the central warnings running underneath this entire chapter is that humanity is developing extraordinary technological power without developing the moral and spiritual maturity necessary to govern it well. And Pope Leo roots this concern in the writings of Romano Guardini, one of the great Catholic thinkers of the modern age. He quotes him directly, "Contemporary man has not been trained to use power well." Chapter 3, paragraph 40. That line is devastating because when you really sit with it, you realize how much of modern civilization is built around increasing power without asking whether human beings are becoming wiser, holier, more disciplined, or more virtuous in the process. And we have more access to information than any civilization in human history. We have more convenience, automation, stimulation, productivity, and technological capability. But are we becoming more morally formed? Are we becoming more contemplative? Are we becoming more charitable and capable of self-mastery, deep relationships, silence, and truth? Because one of the things Pope Leo is exposing in this chapter is that technological advancement by itself does not guarantee authentic human progress. In fact, he quotes St. Paul VI, who warned decades ago, the most extraordinary scientific progress, the most astounding technical feats, and the most amazing economic growth, unless accompanied by authentic moral and social progress, will in the long run go against man. Chapter 3, paragraph 41. That almost feels prophetic now, because modern culture tends to assume that if something is technologically possible, then it's automatically good, it's inevitable, or it's necessary. But the church has never believed that. Capability is not the same thing as wisdom. Efficiency is not the same thing as virtue. And optimization is not the same thing as human flourishing. And I think this is where Pope Leo starts quietly confronting one of the deepest spiritual temptations of the modern world, the temptation to believe that human limitation itself is the problem. It's the idea that weakness is unacceptable, suffering must be eliminated at all costs, dependence is failure, productivity determines worth, and humanity must constantly upgrade itself. And once you notice that mentality, you start seeing it everywhere. When you see it in biohacking culture, the anti-aging movement, transhumanism, and the inability to rest, to sit in silence, or to just simply be. Modern society increasingly treats the human person almost like software needing constant upgrades. And yet Christianity presents a completely different vision. Christ did not come to erase humanity. He entered fully into it. He entered into suffering, limitation, embodiment, labor, relationships, sacrifice, and death itself. And that distinction, it matters enormously because Pope Leo is not warning us against technology. He's warning us against a vision of progress that solely detaches humanity from the very things that make us human in the first place. And once technological power becomes disconnected from morality, spiritual formation, and truth, civilization itself becomes unstable, which is exactly why this chapter feels so urgent. Not because machines are becoming too powerful, but because humanity may be becoming spiritually unprepared for the power it now possesses. Who actually controls the digital world? One of the things Pope Leo does in this chapter that I think is incredibly important is that he forces us to stop thinking about technology as though it exists in some neutral vacuum. Because behind every platform, algorithm, data system, AI model, search engine, and recommendation feed, there are human beings making decisions. There are priorities being embedded, values being reinforced, interests being protected, and specific agendas being prioritized. And Pope Leo points out something that honestly should concern every single person living in the modern world. He writes, in many cases within the digital context, control over platforms, infrastructure, data, and computing power does not rest with states, but with major economic and technological actors. Chapter 3, paragraph 43. That observation is massive. Because what he's really saying is that enormous amounts of cultural, informational, and even psychological power are now concentrated in the hands of a relatively small number of technological institutions and corporations. And many people don't fully realize how deeply these systems now shape daily life. They shape what people see, what they hear, what gets amplified, what gets buried, what becomes visible or invisible, what trends, what spreads, what influences public opinion, and increasingly, even how people emotionally perceive reality itself. That is real power. And Pope Leo warns that when this kind of power becomes concentrated in the hands of only a few actors, it risks becoming opaque and evade public oversight, increasing the risk of distorted forms of development that give rise to new dependencies, exclusions, manipulations, and inequalities. Chapter 3, paragraph 44. And honestly, that word opaque is so important because one of the strangest realities of the AI age is that even the people creating these systems increasingly do not fully understand the systems themselves. Pope Leo says something fascinating here. He writes that current AI systems are often more cultivated than built. Chapter 3, paragraph 46. Meaning, developers create frameworks in which these systems grow, but even the creators themselves do not fully understand the internal computer processes taking place underneath them. That should humble humanity so quickly. We are now building systems that influence billions of people while simultaneously admitting that we do not fully understand their internal operations, the long-term consequences, or emergent behaviors. And this is where Pope Leo's entire framework of discernment becomes so important, because this isn't merely a technical issue. It is a moral, social, political, and deeply spiritual issue. It forces us to ask, who controls information, visibility, and access? Who determines the standards these systems are built upon? Who decides what is optimized? Who benefits from it? And who gets excluded? And this is exactly where Catholic social teaching becomes so relevant to the digital age, because Pope Leo begins applying principles like the common good, subsidiarity, solidarity, justice, and participation directly into technological civilization itself. And this section right here may be one of the most important passages in the entire encyclical. I know I keep saying that. I get excited, but listen to this. He writes, "The principles of social doctrine offer a framework for understanding this new reality." Chapter 3, paragraph 52. Then he begins unfolding what these principles mean specifically in the age of AI. He says, "To speak of the common good means exposing this new form of epistemic, economic, and political asymmetry and naming the new monopolies of AI." Chapter 3, paragraph 53. That phrase, epistemic asymmetry, now I know it sounds foreign or whatever, but that's a crucial phrase. Now, in simple terms, he's talking about an asymmetry in knowledge and informational power. So it describes a world where a small number of entities possess so much control over data, information, systems, and just the technological infrastructure, while ordinary people increasingly become dependent on systems they don't even meaningfully influence. And Pope Leo doesn't stop there. He says, to speak of subsidiarity calls for protecting the ability of communities to make choices and corrections, rather than confining their role to mere oversight after the standards have already been set elsewhere. That's chapter 3, paragraph 54. That's huge, because subsidiarity means decisions should remain as close to the human person and local communities as possible. But in the digital age, and more, decisions are quietly being centralized into systems controlled far away from folks like us, ordinary people. They operate as these invisible systems, like these invisible standards, invisible algorithms, and invisible forms of influence. And Pope Leo is essentially asking what happens when humanity slowly hands over more and more decision-making and visibility and influence and social power into systems ordinary people no longer control. That's not merely a technological question. That is a civilizational question. AI is not human. The danger of simulation. This is where Pope Leo really starts drawing a line in the sand between artificial intelligence and the human person. And honestly, I think that this part of the encyclical is going to become more and more important as AI keeps advancing, because we're already living in a culture that increasingly talks about AI almost like it's becoming human. And Pope Leo basically stops that conversation right there. This is what he says. It is not possible to provide a single comprehensive definition of AI. What can be stated, however, is that we must avoid the misconception of equating this type of intelligence, quote unquote, with that of human beings. Chapter 3, paragraph 57. That distinction is so crucial because modern culture keeps reducing the human person down to intelligence alone. But Christianity has never viewed the human person that way. The human person is body and soul. We are rational, we're embodied, we're spiritual, we're emotional and moral. We are beings capable of love. And Pope Leo pushes this even further when he says, these systems merely imitate certain functions of human intelligence. Chapter 3, paragraph 58. Imitate. That word is so important here because imitation is not communion. And then Pope Leo says something that honestly gave me chills. They do not undergo experiences, do not possess a body, do not feel joy or pain, do not mature through relationships, and do not know from within what love, work, friendship, or responsibility mean. Chapter 3, paragraph 48. That right there cuts straight to the center of this entire conversation, because human beings are not just data processors. We become who we are through love, suffering, relationships, sacrifice, forgiveness, responsibility, failure, growth, memory, and self-gift. A machine can simulate language, but it cannot become a person. And this part of the encyclical really gets unsettling once you start looking honestly at the modern world around us. People are lonely, deeply lonely. They are emotionally exhausted, disconnected, and spiritually numb, starving for real intimacy and real human connection. And now we're creating systems capable of simulating empathy, companionship, validation, friendship, care, attention, and emotional responsiveness. Pope Leo addresses this directly. He writes, the artificial imitation of positive human communication, words of advice, empathy, friendship, and even love can be engaging and at times genuinely helpful. Chapter 3, paragraph 59. And yeah, okay, that's true. We have to be honest about that. But then comes the warning. For less discerning users, it can also be misleading, creating the illusion of a relationship with a real personal subject. Chapter 3, paragraph 60. That is so heavy, because Pope Leo is not warning us that machines are becoming persons. He's warning that human beings may slowly start settling for simulations instead of real communion. And then comes this line that feels so haunting. When words are simulated, they do not build genuine relationships, but only their appearance. Chapter 3, paragraph 61. Only their appearance. And man, I mean, if that doesn't describe so much of modern digital culture, right? Because real relationships require presence, vulnerability, patience, forgiveness, sacrifice, embodiment, shared suffering. And then again, there's that word, genuine self-gift. You can't automate those things. And this connects directly back to what we talked about in the last video regarding the imago Dei, the image of God. If we are created in the image of the triune God, then relationship is not some optional accessory to human life. It is at the core of who we are. We were created by love, for love, and to give love, which means artificial simulations may temporarily soothe loneliness, yeah, but they can never fully satisfy the human heart. And I think Pope Leo sees something deeply tragic unfolding in modern society right now. The more technologically connected we become, the more emotionally disconnected many people are becoming underneath it all. And if we are not careful, we may slowly begin confusing simulated connection with actual love. And that is a very dangerous confusion for the human soul. The crisis of human agency. One of the things Pope Leo starts confronting in this chapter is the danger of humanity slowly outsourcing not just labor, but thought, discernment, creativity, and judgment itself. And this section really convinced me, because when you actually stop and think about it, modern technology increasingly conditions us to avoid struggle. It trains us to avoid waiting, reflection, contemplation, deep thought, wrestling with problems, and just pure silence. Everything is becoming instant, automated, optimized, summarized, generated, and frictionless. And at first glance, I mean, sure, that all sounds amazing, until you realize that many of the things that actually shape and mature the human person happen through effort. They happen through patience, repetition, failure, practice, wrestling with ideas, and learning discipline and responsibility. Pope Leo warns about this directly when he says these systems can encourage excessive reliance and the search for ready-made answers and weaken personal creativity and judgment. Chapter 3, paragraph 63. What an important warning, because there's a difference between technology assisting human intelligence and replacing human agency altogether. And honestly, I think we are already seeing this happen everywhere. People increasingly struggle to read deeply, to retain information, to think critically, or even tolerate boredom for 5 minutes without any kind of stimulation. And this goes way beyond AI. This is connected to the entire digital ecosystem we now live inside, filled with constant notifications, endless scrolling, continuous consumption, dopamine hits, and systemic distraction. Modern technology is increasingly training people to react instead of reflect. And spiritually, that has enormous consequences because the spiritual life requires interiority, attentiveness, contemplation, silence, and the ability to examine yourself honestly before God. And that becomes very difficult in a culture where the mind is constantly overstimulated and externally occupied. One of the things I think Pope Leo is really warning about here is not simply intellectual laziness, it's the gradual erosion of human formation itself. Because human beings are supposed to mature through thinking, through creating, through working, through discerning, through building, struggling, learning, praying, and growing in wisdom. And I think this connects deeply back to Genesis and the dignity of work itself. God gave man stewardship, participation, and responsibility. Human labor is not merely about productivity. It's connected to vocation, to co-creation, and to shaping both the world and ourselves through meaningful action. Which means if technology solely removes humanity from participation itself, we have to start asking very serious questions about what kind of people are we becoming in the process. Because Pope Leo is not arguing that convenience is evil at all. He's asking whether convenience is quietly weakening capabilities that are essential to human flourishing. The ability to think deeply, to choose well, to discern truth, and govern ourselves interiorly. One of the greatest spiritual battles of the digital age may be whether we remain fully awake human beings capable of contemplation, capable of discipline and authentic freedom, or whether we're slowly becoming passive consumers, endlessly shaped by systems designed to think for us instead of helping us think more deeply ourselves. The human cost of AI. Pope Leo is not approaching this conversation in the same way a lot of people online are approaching AI right now. Because most public conversations surrounding AI tend to focus almost entirely on things like copyright, creative theft, artists losing work, deepfakes, misinformation, and whether AI is replacing certain industries. And those are legitimate concerns. But Pope Leo zooms out much further than that. He starts asking what the broader human, social, environmental, and moral consequences are of building an entire civilization around these systems. And I think that perspective is incredibly important. Pope Leo keeps grounding the conversation back to material reality, creation, stewardship, and the actual human beings carrying the weight of these systems. And he points out something that many people rarely think about when they interact with AI every day. He writes, current AI systems require enormous amounts of energy and water, significantly influencing carbon dioxide emissions, and place heavy demands on natural resources. Chapter 3, paragraph 66. Behind all of this convenience, instant responses, automation, and the endless generation of images, videos, text, and data, there is an enormous physical infrastructure underneath it all. Data centers, energy grids, water consumption, mining, machines, cables, storage systems, and servers define this reality. And hidden behind all of that are human beings. Workers, engineers, laborers, manufacturers, people mining resources, and individuals doing invisible labor most users never even think about remain at the foundation of all of this. And Pope Leo keeps bringing us back to something modern society keeps on forgetting. The digital world is not detached from a moral reality, it still impacts creation, workers, communities, and the poor. And this is where Catholic social teaching becomes incredibly powerful in the digital age, because Pope Leo starts directly applying principles like the common good, solidarity, subsidiarity, justice, and the universal destination of goods directly into technological civilization itself. And this section right here is one of the clearest examples of that. He writes, "To speak of the common good means exposing this new form of epistemic, economic, and political asymmetry and naming the new monopolies of AI." Chapter 3, paragraph 53. Then he says, "To speak of the universal destination of goods means finding ways of ensuring universal access to both technologies and the education needed to use them." Chapter 3, paragraph 68. And then he says, "To speak of solidarity obliges us to recognize the hidden, often exploited workers who sustain algorithmic systems." Chapter 3, paragraph 69. We want to absolutely hang on to that line because modern digital culture constantly creates this illusion that technology somehow exists independently from human labor. But it doesn't. There are always human beings underneath the machine, always. And this actually connects all the way back to Genesis and the dignity of work itself. God gave humanity stewardship over creation, participation in creation, and responsibility within creation. Human labor is not some meaningless burden to escape. Work has dignity because it allows humanity to participate in cultivating, shaping, ordering, and caring for the world God entrusted to us. And this is why Pope Leo also begins reframing the very idea of property in this digital age. Pope Leo warns, data is the product of many contributors and should not be treated as something to be sold off or entrusted to a selected few. Chapter 3, paragraph 71. What an extraordinary way to put it. He's essentially arguing that data itself has social consequences tied to the common good. And if humanity refuses to ask moral questions about the systems it creates, eventually those systems begin shaping civilization in ways that quietly undermine human dignity itself. The technocratic paradigm and the anti-human vision. As this chapter starts moving towards its conclusion, Pope Leo begins exposing what he calls the technocratic paradigm. And this right here is where the conversation stops being just about tools and starts becoming about the whole worldview. Pope Leo makes it very clear that the greatest danger is not technology itself. The greater and deeper danger is the vision of humanity that lies underneath. He writes, "The pervasive technocratic paradigm in which we are immersed threatens to normalize an anti-human vision." Chapter 3, paragraph 74. Isn't that heavy? Because what he's describing isn't just the existence of advanced technology. He's describing a mentality, a worldview, and a problematic way of seeing the human person. According to this mindset, the ideal human being becomes more controllable while becoming less vulnerable, less dependent, and more limited. And once you start recognizing that mentality, you begin seeing it absolutely everywhere in our modern culture today. Pope Leo warns that underneath all of this is a temptation to redefine what it means to flourish as a human being. He writes, "In that vision, the fullness of life is equated with having more, reducing weaknesses, eliminating uncertainty, and exerting total control." Chapter 3, paragraph 76. If we're being truthful, modern society increasingly treats limitation itself almost like a defect. Aging becomes unacceptable, dependence becomes failure, and suffering becomes completely meaningless. But Christianity has never viewed humanity that way. Christ himself entered fully into human limitation. He entered into a body, into suffering, labor, fatigue, grief, sacrifice, and death itself. Not to erase humanity, but to redeem it. And Pope Leo keeps drawing this distinction throughout the entire chapter. There is this massive difference between using technology in service of the human person and adopting a worldview that slowly starts treating humanity itself as something obsolete or inefficient. Pope Leo writes, if the human being is treated as something to be perfected or surpassed, it becomes easier to accept that some lives are less useful, less desirable, or less worthy. Chapter 3, paragraph 79. That line should shake you, because history has already shown us what happens when societies begin measuring human worth according to usefulness, productivity, efficiency, and desirability. The vulnerable suffer first. The elderly, the disabled, the poor, the sick, the unborn, and the marginalized, well, they're all pushed aside. And this is why Pope Leo insists over and over again that human dignity is intrinsic. It's not earned. It's not optimized. It's not purchased. It's not technologically upgraded. It's intrinsic because it is given by God. And then comes one of the most beautiful lines in this entire chapter. To renounce this adventure, both tragic and splendid, in the name of a presumed transcendence of all limits, would no longer be human. Chapter 3, paragraph 82. Oh man, I love that line, because Christianity does not deny the difficulty of being human. Human life is tragic and splendid. There is suffering, yes, there's weakness, there's failure, there's loss and mortality. But there's also love, beauty, communion, mercy, sacrifice, holiness, and redemption. And Pope Leo argues that finitude is not the enemy. In fact, he says, finitude, when truly accepted, does not diminish us, but opens us to recognizing the face of God and others. Chapter 3, paragraph 84. Oh man, that is such a radically Christian vision of the human person, isn't it? Because our limitations are often the very places where we encounter dependence, humility, relationship, compassion, and grace. And I think this section of the encyclical ultimately asks a very uncomfortable question of modern society. Are we still trying to become more fully human, or are we solely trying to escape humanity altogether? Two loves, Babel, Jerusalem, and the future of humanity. So as Pope Leo goes in and closes this chapter, he brings the entire conversation back to something deeply spiritually rooted. Because underneath all the discussions about AI and these algorithms and automation and platforms and digital systems and these technological powers, there it is again. It's ultimately about this battle taking place over the human heart. And Pope Leo turns to St. Augustine, who describes all of human history as the conflict between two loves that build two very different kinds of civilizations. Now, he quotes him directly. Two loves have built two cities, the earthly city, the love of self, even to the contempt of God, the heavenly city, the love of God, even to the contempt of self. Chapter 3, paragraph 87. And immediately we're brought right back to the imagery we discussed in the first video, Babel and Jerusalem. They represent two ways of building the world. One is rooted in domination, self-control, power, and pride. The other is rooted in communion, truth, relationship, self-gift, and love ordered toward God. And what I find so powerful is that Pope Leo refuses to leave this conversation floating in theory or in any kind of abstraction. He points directly to the witnesses throughout history who defended human dignity even in moments of profound darkness. He looks to the saints, to Martin Luther King Jr., and to Nelson Mandela. These were men, and he mentioned some women as well, who stood against systems of dehumanization and reminded the world that every human person possesses an inviolable dignity that no ideology, government, or system can erase. And Pope Leo also writes, "It is in this intertwining of just institutions, credible witnesses, and daily fidelity that sustains hope and provides clear direction for technological progress without allowing the heart to regress." Chapter 3, paragraph 91. That line is just so beautiful because it reminds us that Technological advancement alone cannot save civilization. The human heart still requires formation, virtue, truth, and love. And then Pope Leo gives one of the clearest statements in the entire chapter. For this reason, humanity, in all its grandeur and woundedness, must never be replaced or surpassed. Chapter 3, paragraph 94. And that almost feels like the heartbeat of the entire encyclical, because Pope Leo is defending the human person exactly as we are, capable of beauty and cruelty, greatness and weakness, love and sin, heroism and failure. Christianity never denies the reality of human brokenness, but it also never stops proclaiming the sacredness of the human person made in the image of God. And I love that tension throughout this encyclical, because Pope Leo is refusing both extremes. He's refusing the modern temptation to reduce human beings into machines, but he is also refusing the fantasy that humanity can somehow save itself through technological advancement alone. The Christian vision of the human person is far deeper than that. We are wounded by sin. We are finite. We suffer and we fail. And yet we are still capable of holiness, of communion, of mercy, of beauty, of relationship and love. And as this chapter closes, Pope Leo leaves us with one final piece of honesty that feels like both a warning and an invitation. The age of AI is no exception. The construction of Babel or rebuilding of Jerusalem begins with each one of us. Chapter 3, paragraph 98. Within each one of us. Not just the governments, corporations, or Silicon Valley, us. It begins with our choices, habits, priorities, attention, and our loves. Because every civilization is ultimately built from the human heart outward. And the question Pope Leo leaves us with is not merely about what kind of technology we're building, but what kind of people we're becoming while we build it. And in the next video, we're going to move even deeper into Pope Leo's encyclical as he begins unpacking the consequences of all of this on truth, freedom, human labor, digital dependency, information, manipulation, and the future of society itself. And trust me, it gets even deeper from here. And we are pretty deep, okay? Now you can go ahead and continue watching the entire series right over here in this playlist. And I'll see you over here. Make sure that you subscribe, and I'll see you soon.